The bell above the diner door chimed as Kane Walker stepped inside, his German Shepherd gunner padding silently beside him. The interior was nearly empty, just scattered booths and the smell of recycled coffee. Kane had been driving for 18 hours across Vera, Nine's dusty plains, trying to forget what he'd left behind on Earth, trying to forget the war. He slid into a corner booth where he could watch the entrance, old habits dying hard. Gunner settled at his feet, ears alert. The waitress approached with a tired smile. She was young, maybe 25, with iridescent scales along her cheekbones and neck that caught the afternoon light. Dragon hybrid, Kane recognized. Her name tag read Sera. Before she could speak, the door burst open. 3 Kryll gangsters stalked inside, their gray exoskeletons clicking with each step, mandibles twitching. The led one, taller than the others, wore a red sash marking him as an enforcer. Kane's hand instinctively moved toward his hip, finding nothing. He'd left his weapons in the truck, trying to be someone else. The lead Kryll grabbed Sera by the wrist, yanking her close. "Time's up, little flame. Boss wants his payment. Triple rate this week." Sera's scales flickered with distress. "I already paid." "You took everything last month. Not enough." The Kryll's grip tightened until Sera winced. "Maybe we teach you a lesson instead." Kane stood slowly. Gunner rose with him, a low growl building in his throat. Every eye in the diner turned toward them. The soldier knew he should walk away, keep his head down, stay invisible, but his feet carried him forward anyway. Some instincts ran deeper than survival. Let her go. Kane's voice was quiet, controlled, the tone he'd used when ordering men into firefights. The Kryll released Sera and turned, sizing Kane up. "Human. This doesn't concern you. I'm making it my concern." Kane positioned himself between Sera and the gangsters. Gunner moved to his left flank, hackles raised. The lead Kryll laughed, a rasping sound like metal scraping stone. "You know who we work for? The Kryll Syndicate owns this colony. The law, the government, everything. You're just some drifter with a pet. That pet has killed things meaner than you." Kane's eyes never left the enforcer's face. "Last chance. Walk out." The Kryll reached for the plasma cutter at his belt. Kane moved first. 3 years of close-quarters combat training compressed into 2 seconds. He grabbed the Kryll's wrist, twisted hard, and slammed the gangster face first into the nearest table. The plasma cutter clattered to the floor. Gunner launched at the second Kryll, 70 pounds of trained fury clamping onto the alien's arm. The third rushed Kane, but the human sidestepped and drove an elbow into the creature's thorax with a crack. All 3 Kryll were down in under 10 seconds. The lead enforcer scrambled to his feet, green blood leaking from a crack in his exoskeleton. "You just signed your death warrant, human. We'll be back with the whole crew. You and everyone in this diner are dead." They limped out, the door slamming behind them. Kane helped Sera to her feet. She was shaking, her scales rippling with barely contained fear, and something else, something like fire burning just beneath the surface. "You shouldn't have done that. They'll come back with dozens, maybe hundreds." "How long have they been doing this?" Kane asked. 6 months, ever since the Syndicate moved operations here. They extort every business on this street. The colonial authority is paid off. No one helps. Sera's voice cracked. No one ever helps. Kane looked at Gunner, who sat calmly licking his chops. The dog tilted his head as if asking a question. Kane knew what it was. Are we running or are we fighting? He'd spent 2 years running from who he used to be, from the soldier who'd lost too many friends, who'd seen too much death. But looking at Sera's frightened face, at the other diner workers huddled in the kitchen, he realized some things were worth fighting for. Some lines couldn't be uncrossed. "How long until they get back?" Kane asked. 20 minutes. Maybe less. Sera wiped her eyes. "You should go. Take your dog and run. I'll tell them you left." Kane shook his head. "Get everyone into the kitchen. We're going to fortify this place. You can't fight them all." "They have weapons, armor. I've fought worse." Kane was already moving, shoving tables against windows, eyeing sight lines and choke points. Gunner, perimeter check. The shepherd trotted to each window and door, nose working. Kane worked fast, Using everything available, he emptied cooking oil on the floor near the entrance, creating a slick zone. He positioned chairs as obstacles, broke bottles for makeshift caltrops, and wedged the back door shut with a metal shelf. Sera watched in amazement as the diner transformed into a defensive position. "You were military," she said. "Not a question. Marine Corps, 5th Expeditionary. Fought in the Outer Rim conflicts." Kane tested a barricade. "You said you're a flame. Can you breathe fire?" Sera's scales darkened. I can't. Not anymore." "Can't or won't?" "Both." Her voice was barely a whisper. "When I was 16, I got angry and lost control. I hurt people I cared about. I swore I'd never use it again." Kane met her eyes. "Sometimes we have to become what we fear to protect what we love, but that's your choice, not mine." The rumble of engines cut off further conversation. Through the window, Kane counted 8 Kryll and 2 armored trucks, all carrying weapons. The lead enforcer stood on the roof of the first vehicle, a bullhorn in his clawed hand. "Human, come out now and we'll make it quick. Stay inside and we burn the building with everyone in it." Kane checked his makeshift weapons. A heavy frying pan, a handful of kitchen knives, a fire extinguisher, laughable against plasma weapons and body armor, but he'd worked with less. "Gunner, pattern Delta." The dog moved to a position behind an overturned booth, invisible from the entrance but with a clear attack angle. Kane took position beside the door. Sera crouched behind the counter, trembling. The Kryll didn't wait for a response. The first 2 charged through the door and immediately hit the oil slick. Their legs went out from under them. Kane brought the frying pan down on the first one's head with a metallic crunch. Gunner exploded from cover, jaws clamping on the second's neck joint where the armor was weakest. Green blood sprayed. 2 more rushed in. Kane threw a knife, catching one in the eye. The Kryll screamed, firing wildly. Plasma bolts scorched the ceiling. Kane dove, grabbed the dropped plasma cutter from earlier, and fired point blank into the 4th attacker's chest. The Kryll collapsed in a smoking heap, but 4 more were coming, and these had learned from the first wave's mistakes. They spread out, using cover, firing in coordinated bursts. A plasma bolt grazed Kane's shoulder, burning through his jacket. He gritted his teeth against the pain and returned fire, but they were being overwhelmed. Gunner yelped as a shot singed his flank. The shepherd kept fighting, but Kane saw the mathematics of the situation. They had maybe 2 minutes before the Kryll overran their position. Then he heard it, a sound like wind rushing through a canyon, building in intensity. He turned to see Sera standing, her scales glowing orange and red, her mouth open. Fear and rage roared in her expression. The fear was losing. Fire erupted from her throat in a concentrated stream, engulfing the 2 nearest Kryll. They shrieked, their armor melting, their weapons clattering to the ground as they fled. The remaining attackers hesitated, suddenly faced with a threat they hadn't anticipated. Sera advanced, another gout of flame forcing them back through the door. Her eyes blazed with unleashed power and years of suppressed anger. Kane seized the moment. "Gunner, hunt!" The German shepherd charged after the retreating Kryll, harrying them and driving them toward their trucks. Kane followed, plasma cutter in hand, providing covering fire. Sera stood in the doorway, flames still dancing at the corners of her mouth, a guardian made of fire and fury. The Kryll scrambled into their vehicles and retreated, leaving their dead behind. But Kane knew this wasn't over. He'd embarrassed them, hurt them. They'd come back with everything they had. He turned to Sera, who was breathing hard, smoke curling from her nostrils. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, looking at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. "I didn't hurt anyone innocent. I controlled it. You saved us." Kane checked Gunner's wound. "Superficial. The tough bastard would be fine, but they'll be back. Bigger numbers, heavier weapons." "Then why are you smiling?" Sera asked. Kane realized he was. For the first time in 2 years, he felt alive. "Because now we know what we're up against, and we're going to hit them first." 30 minutes later, Kane sat in a diner's basement with Sera, sketching plans on a napkin. Gunner rested nearby, a makeshift bandage around his ribs. "The Syndicate's local headquarters is 4 blocks from here. That's where they'll stage from. How many fighters can they field? Maybe 50 in the city, but most are scattered doing collections. Sera studied the map. Their boss Thexar. He's usually at the headquarters with about 20 guards. Then that's where we hit them. Take out the head. The body dies. Kane marked key positions. We'll need a distraction. Something to draw the guards out. That's suicide. Even with my fire, we can't fight 20 Kryll. We don't fight them. We outlast them. Kane's finger traced a line on the map. There's a maintenance tunnel that runs under this block, right? I saw the access hatch outside. Sera nodded slowly. It connects to the old mining shafts, but those lead right under the Syndicate building. Exactly. We go in underneath, set charges, and collapse the whole structure. Thexar and his guards get buried, and the Syndicate loses its command center. We don't have explosives, Kane smiled grimly. This diner runs on compressed gas, right? So does every building on this street. We just need to redirect the flow and give it a spark. That could level the entire block. Only if we're not precise. But we will be. Kane looked at her. I can do this alone if you want out. Sera's scales shimmered with determination. They've terrorized this colony for months. Someone has to stop them. I'm in. They moved fast. Kane and Gunner descended into the tunnels, while Sera stayed above, ready to provide the spark when needed. The passages were dark and cramped, filled with decades of industrial runoff and forgotten equipment. Kane worked by feel, his military training guiding him through the maze. He found the main gas junction and began rerouting pipes, creating a concentrated flow toward the Syndicate headquarters foundation. Above! He heard shouting. The Kryll had returned, surrounding the diner. Perfect. Let them focus there while he worked. Gunner's ears perked up. A low growl warning Kane of movement in the tunnel. 3 Kryll scouts had found their way down, plasma rifles raised. Kane doused his light and moved silently. In the darkness, the Kryll's bioluminescent eyes gave away their positions. Kane grabbed a piece of rebar from the ground and struck fast. The first Kryll dropped without a sound. The second fired blindly, the plasma bolt illuminating Kane's position. Mistake. Kane threw the rebar like a spear, catching the Kryll in the throat. The third turned to run, but Gunner was faster. The shepherd's jaws found purchase, and silence returned. Kane finished his work, setting a timer on the gas release. 15 minutes. He and Gunner raced back through the tunnels, emerging in the diner's basement just as the Kryll began their assault on the building. Sera was at the back window, flames keeping them at bay. It's done, Kane said. We need to get everyone out now. They evacuated the staff through the rear exit while Sera covered them with walls of fire. The Kryll pressed harder, thinking they were winning. Above the chaos, Kane heard a new sound. A heavy transport landing. His blood ran cold. Thexar himself had arrived, along with what looked like a mobile artillery piece. The Crawl boss's voice boomed across the street. Enough games, human. Surrender or I level this entire block. Everyone in it. 8 minutes. Too long. They'd be dead in 2. He looked at Sera, at Gunner, at the terrified workers huddled behind them. Then he made a choice that would haunt him, or save him. Nothing in between. Sera, can you superheat the gas line from here? I'd need to get close to the main pipe. That's under the Syndicate building. I'll get you there. Gunner, stay with the civilians. Protect them. The dog whined in protest, but Kane's tone left no room for argument. He and Sera sprinted through the back alleys, using smoke and confusion as cover. Plasma bolts chased them, scorching walls and pavement. They reached the access hatch Kane had used earlier and descended into darkness. Behind them, they heard Thexar's artillery piece charging up. One shot would obliterate the diner and everyone near it. They had maybe 30 seconds. Kane led Sera to the gas junction, where pipes now hissed with concentrated fuel. Hit it with everything you've got. When I say, above, the artillery fired. Kane felt the vibration through the tunnel walls. He grabbed Sera and pulled her into a side shaft. Now, Sera unleashed a torrent of flame that turned the junction into an inferno. The gas ignited in a chain reaction that raced through the pipes like a living thing. Kane and Sera ran as the world behind them exploded. The force threw them 20 feet, slamming them against stone. Kane's ears rang. His vision blurred, but he grabbed Sera's hand and kept moving. The tunnel collapsed behind them, but ahead, emergency lights flickered on. They emerged into a maintenance sub-level beneath a different building, gasping for air. Through the ceiling they heard screaming, crashing, the sound of structures failing. Kane pulled Sera up a ladder to street level. What they found was chaos. The Syndicate headquarters had collapsed inward, a smoking crater where a 3-story building once stood. Thexar's artillery piece was overturned, crushed beneath falling debris. Kryll scattered in every direction, leaderless and panicked. The colonists, seeing their oppressors broken, finally found their courage. They emerged from homes and businesses with whatever weapons they could find, driving the remaining gangsters out. Kane limped back to the diner, every muscle screaming. Gunner bounded over, licking his face, tail wagging furiously. Sera collapsed beside him, her scales dim with exhaustion. Around them, the citizens of Vera, 9 were reclaiming their streets. An older man approached, tears in his eyes. "You did it. After all these months, someone finally stood up." Kane shook his head. "We just lit the match. You all did the rest." Over the next hours, colonial security finally arrived, their courage renewed now that the Syndicate's leadership was eliminated. They rounded up the surviving Kryll and began the work of cleaning up. Kane sat on the diner's front step, Gunner's head in his lap, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and red. Sera sat beside him, her scales gradually returning to their natural shimmer. "What now? You gonna keep drifting?" Kane was quiet for a long moment. He'd been running for 2 years trying to escape who he was, what he'd been trained for. But today had reminded him that some skills weren't curses. They were tools, and tools could build as easily as they destroyed. "Maybe I'll stick around for a while. This colony could use someone who knows how to handle trouble." "And Gunner?" "Wherever I go, he goes. That's the deal." Sera smiled, the first genuine smile Kane had seen from her. "The diner needs a new security consultant. And maybe a part-time dishwasher. I don't do dishes. Then Gunner can supervise while you consult." Kane found himself smiling too. For the first time since the war ended, he could see a future that wasn't just running from the past. A future where his skills protected instead of destroyed, where his training saved lives instead of taking them. A future where a soldier, a dragon woman, and a loyal dog could stand against the darkness and win. The stars emerged overhead, cold and distant. But here on Vera 9, in this small diner on a forgotten colony, something warm was being born. Not just safety, but hope. The kind of hope that humans carried wherever they went. The stubborn refusal to bow, to break, to surrender. The galaxy was vast and often cruel, filled with predators and power-hungry syndicates. But it also had people like Kane, who would stand in the gap, who would fight when fighting mattered, who would remind the universe that humanity never stayed down for long. Gunner barked once, sharp and clear, as if agreeing with thoughts Kane hadn't spoken aloud. Sera laughed, a sound like music, and somewhere in the distance, the colony began to sing.